Hi, everybody. It is time to start discussions with my dad. It is our focus this week will be on determining different ways to approach campaigns, and we are just waiting for him to join us. And here he comes. Hey, Dad, I think that was record time.
Good morning. Absolutely, it's record time. How are you?
I am well. It's been, as usual, an incredibly busy week, but we're making a lot of progress. As you saw yesterday, we have booked a venue for our big kickoff presentation and celebration for the Ready Nation National Tour. So that is very exciting, and I can't wait to announce it to everybody tomorrow. So at least that's our goal, is to announce it tomorrow, which is
fantastic.
Yeah.
Hey, we're making all kinds of strides. I mean, this one was this is one of the record-breaking strides here. I mean, come on,
I know. It's been nuts. But yeah, this week has been, I think every week's really busy, but we're starting to make some concrete progress in areas. So our races, we will be doing, basically, we keep joking that going around the country is like running a marathon, and literally we're going to run a marathon around the country. We're just going to break it up into 5Ks. And so the announcement for that is coming. We just solidified some of the details yesterday. So that's exciting. And some of the co-talk speakers are starting to get booked. So those announcements are coming soon as well. And I meet with my RV wrappers today. So we'll see what they come up with. It's always a gamble when we get into design, trying to figure all of this stuff out. You wouldn't think that there's a lot of decisions to make, but when you're trying to do things differently, it means you can't just go to the usual places and say, make me a political something, because that's what everybody does, right? And so they have all these kind of forms and formats that they follow. And actually, to your questions that we're going to talk about today, we're trying to do it differently than anyone else is. So that means, you know, a lot of trial and error. It means a lot of innovative thinking. It means having to change and question and challenge and really help people to think outside the box. I think if one of the biggest things I've learned is everybody wants to know what the end result will be. And I keep trying to tell them this is a process. This is a journey. And to decide the end point today, I think, is premature. And I actually think that's what a lot of the candidates I wonder about, right? They're making those decisions day one. There's one goal, one definition of success, and everybody fights for that. And I'm not sure everybody defines success as a nation that is ready to come together and be prepared for the future. It's success is defined by them winning something. It's a different way of looking at it. So how's your week been, Dad? What's your questions?
Good, busy weekend. You know, there's always something going on. So it was a great weekend. It was my anniversary yesterday, so that was a good thing. And we celebrated that. Mary took the day off, so that was good too.
Good.
So that was great.
Excellent.
Yes. And, you know, one of the things, and I already sent you the question, or, you know, what her brother sent. I thought it was quite well put. And I think it really fit into I already discussed it with her, sent out. I said, this is really what I think Jenny's direction is, but I just want to read it, and then we can kind of proceed from there rather than keep floundering around. Gary's my wife's brother, and he said this. He said, a comment and a few questions that I ask all candidates. He said, intentions do not determine outcomes, direction does. What will happen if direction is not changed? How will candidates change present direction? What areas need to change for the betterment of the USA? And when suggested change are made, what will be the outcome? We can start with the first one. Intentions are not intentions, don't create direction. I mean, they're just there. So, you know, what do we do to change that and make it happen? So, and that's in your wheelhouse. I think that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I used to joke when I was in government, they didn't hire me to be the same. They hired me to challenge the system. So if the only answer I have is one you've already heard, then we're wasting everyone's time, right? So I think when we get to questions of intention versus actual pathway and action, the thing that we see a lot of times is candidates come out with a platform, and that platform is decided by someone else. Secondly, someone else writes the speech. Third, someone else comes up with the recommendations. And underlying all of that is generally a candidate who has spent a lot of time in the public eye and who's been spending a lot of time fundraising, but who almost exclusively has not spent any time in the executive branch. And there's just so much to know about it. And so I always find it interesting, and I think it would be challenging to be a candidate who hasn't spent any time in the area in which they're applying for a job. So I think the first thing is that candidates work their tails off, and they're all very smart, and they've done a lot of work, but I think their intention is to make change and to make improvements. But when you haven't done your homework to figure out how those would actually occur and how they would move forward, I think we frequently, over and over and over again, see the same problem. People make promises, and then they get in and realize the system is way more complicated than they realize. And once you realize that, generally they come to the conclusion that you actually have to change the system before you can affect change. And so that's where a lot of folks don't realize there's something called the President's Management Agenda. And actually wrote about this in my book. So a President's Management Agenda says this is how we're going to fix the government. And every administration has one. And what's interesting is when you look at them in an aggregate, right? Like look at them over time. And just going over the past three, we had Bush, who said, can you believe how many problems we have in government? No wonder we can't fix things. And then you had Obama, who really said, let me dream up a lot of solutions, brought a lot of innovation in, but also had a challenge of bringing it all together and to the American people. And so then a lot of people, not knowing how this process works, said, we see a lot happening, but we don't see a lot finishing. We need a disruptor. And that's where you have this administration in currently, who is also saying there's a whole lot of problems in government, which is why we can't affect change. So the thing that I recommend and where I would change course, which is not just intention, but actually doing, is I've laid out a plan for how to connect programs. Because the number one thing that's a problem in government is communication. You have every department solving oftentimes the same problem or a similar problem independently. And then they aren't necessarily connecting that to the states and the communities. When you bring all that together, that's when you can affect change better. So I think that's the first point that has to be made.
Yeah, I think in business or anywhere else, I mean, every place silos their little area, yeah. and so they have a tendency to be quite protective of that silo, and so what they do is they don't try to cross communicate. And I mean that goes, I don't care in a small group or even in a large group. I mean it's been an inherent problem in business. It's an inherent problem in government, is the siloing process, and then people guarding their own little turf and don't want to share a bunch of stuff, and convincing them to share for the greater good is the thing that you're going to be challenged with. That's really the challenge, is making sure that they understand this is for the greater good to share and make it happen. I think one of the examples where it's been is starting to happen when they did Homeland Security and developed that whole thing. They found out that one of the biggest problems within government from that type of environment was there was no cross communications. The FBI didn't talk to the Secret Service didn't talk to whoever the local authorities, yep. Blah, 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 and it went down and down and down, and they had to figure out how to get that done. So I think that's still in a maturation process, but the fact is that was one that I can see as far as one that's present at this point and can happen. So, yeah, good.
Yeah,
I hope you can get that done. I think that's a challenge for you.
Well, so that's actually, it's an interesting question. I think it's easy for us to all say we need to communicate better. That's easy. It is easy to say we're going to create a task force and it's going to bring 10 people to the table who have expertise in something, and we're going to create a report. That that just means a lot of people came to the table to write a really long report. It doesn't necessarily mean it gets implemented. And so where the challenge comes in is actually tearing apart the system and understanding how it works, right? So number one, Congress funds you on a funding line, and you're responsible for whatever that line says. Well, that line rarely says, and solve this problem with collaboration, and we will give you money and permission to do that. So that's your first problem, is just the way funding is written. There's no in-between funding available. The second thing is that when your outcome is a report, I mean, you have to have a report. But like I'm dealing in lifelong education, right? Out of the Pentagon. And I have on my desk a stack this big of paper. And this paper is front and back sided, printed. It's 600 pages. And you know what the topic was? How to fund early childhood education, so preschool level. And about 600 pages they had to write. How many people do you think are reading that? And how many people from different groups are reading that? And I'm going to go with a goose egg, right? Nobody's reading that. It's way too long, way difficult to digest. And so then it's not actionable at the end. So I think it's easy for us to say we should be discussing more, but people don't even know where to start. Another great example was Puerto Rico. I mean, I got on the phone with FEMA and said, why in the world did we not use some of the resources we have in DOD for pre-planning? We could have given people so much information so that they would have been prepared, and that we would have been prepared for when this hurricane hit, and then how to deal with it. And they said to me, they're not allowed to get involved till after. They don't know about the programs that we use. And all these resources are actually freely available, even freely available online. I mean, anybody can find them. And I spoke to the Coast Guard, and they told me they were still dealing in analog. I said, wait a minute, you're writing things down and mailing them back. It's easy to see the problems there, right? So we're really not sharing, and we're not sharing in a way that's usable, digestible, or actionable. So to Gary's point, how are you going to change direction? You have to understand the foundational issues and why just discussing it or saying you're going to do better is never, ever going to work.
Good. True. It's
yeah.
People living in a different world in each one of their own little silos. Again, that's what we're talking about. Yeah. It's just, and it's not even, in your case, in what you're describing, they're not even trying to protect it. They're not even allowed to participate in it. So that's right. And I think that's probably the whole point of what we're talking about right here, right now, and probably the most valid is the fact is that we've grown a government that disallows innovation, as you pointed out. It's not letting the people really do what they need to do. I always remember when you talk on, I believe it was in Follow My Red Shoes in your blog, about how these people are being told to do something and they have nowhere else to go and how to do it, and then they write it, and then somebody says, well, what happened? Why is this way? And I thought that was an intriguing point, because it shows how ineffective a large group can be if you don't give it the right, recipe for success. Period. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, you gotta create a recipe that's built on success, not on just doing. I mean, because doing just turns into circles and you go around and you never get anywhere.
The hamster wheel.
Yeah, it's just a hamster wheel sitting. Exactly. It's just a hamster wheel. What do you do? So, anyhow, Good. Yeah. And I think these are points that I sent you. I thought your last article on Red Shoes was pretty sharp. I mean, and I told you that. I said I think it should be like your stump speech and push, because we need to know where you're going to drive and how you can drive everything and how it's going to happen. So good deal.
Yeah. So I want to respond to a comment that's just being made that. The bill, the comments, the reports, the bills, they all get really, really long, and information gets lost in that. And one thing I really want to make a point of saying is that this is actually easily solvable. And that is something we don't hear about on the news, because changing the way we operate in government is not what we consider kind of a sexy, interesting topic. But it would be amazing how much you could just immediately make happen by saying yes to the people who are working in government. There's a perception that we have a lot of sloths and we have people running on a treadmill and going nowhere. It's not so much that we have sloths. I found tremendous people in government. In fact, I was actually blown away with what I found. But the treadmill concept is absolutely the case. And so if all you did is say, yes, you can get off the treadmill and start running forward, as soon as you unleash the power of 2.5 million people who have been working in this system and who have great ideas, I think our country, I actually wonder what the media would do, because there would be so much positive activity happening and it would be so tremendously impactful. And it's not because I would be amazing or anything like that. It's because there are so many amazing people working who oftentimes don't get permission to put their information out there to affect change. And all the innovators that come in, they last a year or two and say, oh my gosh, these rules, this fear-driven decision-making, it hinders forward movement. So I don't care what political party someone's in. If we just empowered our government workers to do the things that they know they need to do to be successful, I really think we would be amazed.
Great. I can't add anything to that. I think that really, no, I mean, that's why we do this. I mean, I think it's vitally important that type of view gets out there, that, you know, all we've done is bridle these departments and people and individuals with great ideas and stuff, rather than sitting down and taking the bridle off a little bit and let them run with great ideas and implementation. I think giving them the power to implement, I think they sit down and they come up with all these great ideas and they record them, but they're never given permission to implement. And I think that's really because people are so afraid that in the implementation process, something's going to happen and it's going to reflect badly on who they are, what they are, and what they're doing. And I think that has to be kind of driven away from them also. I mean, I understand their plight, because they're career, individuals going in, and they don't want to be wiped out from where they put a lot of effort in, and so they don't want to be, put in a bad light for that, and so they become very protective of where they are. Blah blah blah. We could go on and on and on about that explanation. So, if you can institute and implement a posture, which is really what it is, it's a whole environmental change across the board about thought process, implementation process, and getting things done, period. So
yeah. And
did you see any of these? Go ahead.
I was going to say, we may also look at some of our adversaries who aren't afraid to go ahead and press forward. That's one of the things that really stuck out in my international travel, is recognizing that other countries make decisions, try things, and press forward, where we make decisions on political basis oftentimes, and those leadership hierarchies. But in smaller countries, they're able to be more agile than us because they can make changes immediately. In some of our larger adversarial nations like China, when you start looking at where they're putting their money and where we're putting our money, they're taking chances and we're playing it safe.
Yeah. That's really, we're transitioning into something that I really like to talk about too today, is those threats in that environment. When you talk about China, and you talk about Russia, and you talk about their willingness to challenge us. I mean, sincerely, this is I hate to use a sports analogy, but this is a they're out there challenging us on every level and every position we're at to take the winning ground. They want to go to the high ground and they want to be there. I mean, and both Russia and China are doing the same to do it, take that high ground away from us. And we're not meeting that challenge very solidly right now, I don't believe. I don't think it's in technology. I don't think we're doing it in so many different facets of our world. And you can comment a whole lot more than I can because of your exposure across the world in different areas. But I'd like you to expound on that a little bit, because that's a scary thought. I mean, we're already talking about possibilities of problems in Iran right now today, and so the Middle East is also, which I put on the list. I mean, these challenges are very, very, very real, and we need innovators to take charge and go and keep us on top rather than sitting behind. In your comment.
Yeah, so I think what's happened that oftentimes becomes challenging across the generations is that the economy and the way we operate from a military perspective is changing, and it's changing dramatically, and it's changing in ways it hasn't changed in the past. So first, it's changing in the sense that the technology allows smaller nations to compete in a way that they weren't able to in the past, right? We were strong because we had the majority of resources. We had both physical resources, technological resources, and financial resources. And then, of course, just number of people. So that makes you a powerhouse in many ways. However, as the world changes and we're able to have battles that are not co-located, meaning they're separated geographically, it means that you need to be able to purchase a computer, and that's about it. So the cost to participate has reduced so much that it has leveled the playing field. And in fact, there are benefits to smaller nations because, again, they can find their very best person and build them up for whatever reason for national goals. And we have to compete with companies to get the best people. So our military has been discussing substantially the difficulty in talent management, right? Attracting the right talent and then also keeping them. Because when a company can spend a whole lot more money than we can, young people are gravitating towards that, right? And so one, you've got the change in military, and then two, you've got the economy. When we have rules and regulations on American businesses, they can just hire somebody from another country. And so, like it or not, agree or disagree, a lot of Americans are buying that which is the least expensive. And that means going to some of our global places to purchase. And they are having to compete for jobs that people in other countries can work at a lower rate. Unfortunately, what's happening right now is we're working in tariffs, and we're working in essentially trying to what I call regulate fairness, right? You don't buy enough from us, we will tax you in order to be able to try and even it out. Very short-term solution. You'll see an impact immediately, but it won't sustain, because what you're not doing is building up all of our people to be ready over the next 20 years. What you're doing is putting in a crutch that holds us together for 3 to 5 years and then creates a major problem later. We have to deal with education, and we have to deal with empowering our people to recognize the world's getting far more competitive, and we've kind of lived in a bubble.
Yeah, I think that education is certainly the foundation for everything. I think we need to also get people enthusiastic about making change and wanting to, make change. I think the enthusiasm part is waning from the standpoint, all we want to do is feel good all the time about everything, and that's really not going to solve anything. And that's pretty, feeling good and happy and everything. While that is usually the essential goal for what we do, it can't be the gasoline that drives the engine, because the engine will not work with just feeling, good feelings around. Now, on that subject, and I say this, and I think we need to go back a few years, but one of the things that we needed to do is make sure that people are good to each other. You know, I've made a real practice of saying good morning to people as I walk by. I always, you know, greet them and when I can. And I know I'm a little bit different than people from that perspective because I enjoy people. But the fact is, you'd be surprised, you know, people with a long face or whatever, and you say, good morning, how are you this morning? I don't even know them. I said it, I bet I've already said it at least 10 times this morning to different people because I shop very early in the morning and I had to go pick up my dog and do different things. You'd be surprised how many smiles you get at that point. Now, I'm not going to say it's 100%, but I'll bet you it's a good 90 to 95% of the people respond positively to that kind of activity. We don't need to keep looking down at the sidewalk and don't want to say something to somebody. Treat your neighbor with some respect and say good morning, and you'd be surprised how many would say it back to you and smile. I mean, and I think that would go a long way also in making people feel comfortable and making change because now they know everybody's participating in the change.
Yes.
That's one of the key issues is participating in the change. Let's do it with some vigor. Let's do it with some enthusiasm out there. And we're not an unhappy nation. We have a great deal to be thankful for. We have a great deal to be happy about. I mean, you know, everybody thinks it sounds like it's a tragic place. It's not a tragic place to live. I mean, it is quite a wonderful place to live. It's, you know, make good choices in your life. You know, and you talk about communication. Communicate with your neighbor and talk to them and say hello. Take your dog for a walk. You'll be surprised how many neighbors you meet and talk to and find out what's going on. It's hilarious. So I guess that's one of the points that I wanted to make this morning is that part. And let you expound on what we talked about from Gary's questions. I think that we're doing a good job on that.
Well, Dad, I think I want to add to your point that apparently we should have Dad's good morning challenge. How many people can you say good morning to? Well, we'll have to post that. Good morning challenge. I know. Something easy and quick everybody can do. And it is true. You know, as a psychologist, obviously, I look a lot at people's behavior, but I really look at the strategic level, so across the entire nation. And it's concerning, to say the least, that we are not connecting. And where that ends up going to very predictably is a bad place. You know, in my travels overseas and studying across nations, when there was a disintegration of connectivity across countries, that's when you saw civil war break out. And it may not be the case that it's civil war like we saw in our nation many years ago. It may not be to that extent, but it already is here. As far as I think Pew put out 50% of Americans are afraid of the other political party. I mean, afraid, physically afraid. That should concern everyone, regardless of party. We shouldn't be in a position where we can't act appropriately and have discussions. And the reason it's problematic is because it results in an inability to work together, and it works to our adversary's advantage. One of the major things I talked about in military was one of our biggest problems in the country is we don't have the nation behind us. So you can't just rely on our military men and women to fight all the battles for us. We also have to be a nation that stands behind them. Secretary Mattis, our former Secretary Mattis, used to say, lead with the power of inspiration, backed by the power of intimidation. Our military is like the goalie on the soccer field. There are many players ahead of the goalie who should be taking care of things, and we are those players. Absolutely.
And I think it starts at the very bottom. I mean, of us, you know, saying a simple good morning, of us being enthusiastic. I mean, it doesn't matter. Almost any, and I'll go back to sports, almost every great team who's ever been successful, they don't are always the most talented.
No.
They're most connected, where they're connected between the lines and together. And I mean, it's as simple as the old thing, you know, a hand opener or a closed fist. It doesn't matter, you know, which one worked better and it's stronger. You know, it's this, not this. Okay, so we can use all kinds of analogies and all kinds of things, but first, I think and foremost right now, especially the way it seems our country is divided, the way it goes. I think the more we try to connect with our fellow man, the better off we're going to be to initiate the changes that you've laid out and discussed with us right now, because they'll be more receptive to that change, and we'll all. I think we'll all feel more comfortable and safe.
Yeah.
I mean, safety is the big thing. One of the things we can go on forever, and you know me, I can talk, but one of the things I was so afraid of after 9/11 was how many people were going to give up all their rights for safety. It was one of the things that just it bothered me. I thought people were just going to abandon every right they have to be safe, and I kind of understand it, but you know, we can't. Rights and safety can go together. I mean, they're not exclusive. They can certainly, you know, reside in the same place. It's just how are they, you know, developed and what they do. So, but I think your points, and going back to China and Russia, and I know, you know, we all face those eventually, and it's going to be a challenge. And if they're more open bordered than we are, and when it comes to communications or you know, experimenting, which we used to do, we were a very experimental country.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's how, you know, we were much more into that than going along and trying to just protect our little turf. So it is good.
Yeah, they say 60% of our economic development over the lifetime of our nation is based on innovation paid for by government.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it's a huge thing. Where I think we've kind of lost our way is in connecting those innovation groups together to create demonstrative or measurable change in the country, and then communicating that to everyone. A lot of people don't realize
Good.
there is a ton of positive work coming out of government, but when you have a 30-day committee review requirement just to get out one tweet, you might imagine people don't spend their energy sharing their work with the country. And so under one hat for Department of Defense, I was able to share constantly what it was that we were doing. But under my work with Office of Personnel Management, we basically couldn't share anything. And I think that's a shame. I kept saying it all the time. This is tremendous work. This is great news. The country deserves to hear about it. And I constantly heard back, we can't say anything, we can't share anything, we keep it internal. There's a fear that somebody would take credit or that somebody would misunderstand or something. I thought, just what a shame that the goal is to hide good work. That just makes absolutely no sense. I mean, I don't think I'm restating that wrong, that the cost is hiding good work. And the nation would love to hear the positive stories and the things that get changed and the things that happen. And that's why I keep saying, I think the difference between me and what everyone else is doing is because I spent time doing my homework and going and finding the projects, programs, and people that are working in government that are making the difference, or that could make a difference with simple permission granted, is that instead of making the promises, just as Gary pointed out, the change in course is recognizing who to unleash and empower. And so I think if I were to get into the position, if I were president of the United States, I think people would say, I had no idea all this stuff was happening. I think people would be shocked. And again, it wouldn't be because I did something special, but because I would empower all those other people to do what they do best.
Good. I'm going to close out with one thing.
Okay, go.
And this might surprise you on this, and I was surprised. I asked everybody I came in contact after I got your books.
Yeah.
Okay, and I asked them. I said, "Did you know that there was a U.S. government bookstore?" And absolutely 100% of the people I asked had no idea.
No idea.
And I didn't know about it, and I started looking into it and going down what's in there. If everybody would take a moment and go to the U.S. government bookstore and look what is available to them and the work that has been done. It's amazing. And I said, you can find almost anything you want in the U.S. government bookstore. And it's absolutely amazing. And I tell them and they go, a U.S. government bookstore? I mean, it's like, yeah, it's right there. It's bigger than any bookstore you know about. So I want to close out with that. And again, I think our discussion's been really good this morning about covering that. We didn't cover much of a specific topic such as, you know, taxes or anything like that. But I thought the topic was absolutely brought up by Gary, which was amazing. It's so timely. I mean, I thought it was just when he sent it to me. Actually, I read it this morning, so that's why I sent it on to you and everything like that. Immediately, I thought, wow, this is a great topic for everything. So
yeah,
why don't you close out what you're going to do and do what you're going to do?
Yeah, people need to realize that you have to fix the system before you can implement any changes. And this is something that is not being heard at all, but needs to. So we need to keep doing that. And but I'll also add 2 links to the 2 books that we published under the bookstore. You want to get information out at a very low cost to taxpayers. Publish them for free. It's an easy solution. I mean, and then, you know, it's funny, Dad,
how much better is that?
When I went to my boss at the Pentagon and I said, sir, we're going to go ahead and publish this and make it publicly available. And he said, he absolutely freaked out. JJ, I want this information immediately. And you're talking about a 2-year process. I do not have time and we are not going to spend the money to do this. And I said, sir, all I need is your permission. I only have to sign a piece of paper and it'll be published immediately. There is 0 cost, 0 effort, and 0 time required. And he said, what? I didn't know that there was a thing like that. I didn't know that existed. I said, it does. And so when we gave him the book, he said, his last words to me when I left were, who would have ever thought we could publish a book out of the Pentagon? I said, me. Wow. Matters. Yeah, for sure.
Good.
Well, thank you, Dad. Right. And I look forward to next week. And
absolutely. And look how.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping we can come up with some ideas going forward so I can go ahead and publish those. Yeah. And that would be great. And that way you can invite friends and people can start getting excited about it.
Been doing
especially
that.
Since we know how to get online now.
God, that was really smooth this morning. That was the best yet. Boy, we got her down now. We're rolling.
Even old guys can be taught something, right, Dad?
Hey, our old wheels, even 3 of them are flat. We can still make it around the corner. Okay.
All right. See you later, Dad.
Take care, dear. Be good. Bye.